Okay, thank you everyone. This has been a wonderful night. I want to thank Gloria and Annie for setting this up. I didn't set it up, I'm a slug. And I apologize to everyone for never having readings for these books, for the Fly Cotton.
This pandemic.
I know. The idea for these chapbooks came, we were at a reading, Jen, right, in Somerville, I think?
Yeah.
And we were talking, Jen, Cindy Beach, and Jennifer Jean, and myself, and I wanted to do a chapbook series, and they were kind of a persona series. So each book is based on one person, except for Annie's, which is based on Chernobyl, which is a person in itself.
Yeah.
So the series came out lovely. Unfortunately, I got them just before I started driving to San Antonio for AWP, and then all shit hit the fan. So the first person up is Hannah Larrabee. Hannah just came back from an exciting trip in the Arctic that I'm so jealous about. Sailing around Svalbard with scientists as part of the Arctic Circle residency. Her first full-length collection, Wonder Tissue, won the Arley Press Poetry Prize, and she's had her work appear in Adirondack Review, Glass Journal of Poetry, Lambda Literary Spotlight, and Nixes Mate. She's also one of our. Are we going to call you guest editor, or are we going to call you editor now?
Let's be a guest editor.
A guest editor at Nixes Mate. Hannah Larrabee.
And say thank you everyone who's read. It's great to be here, and I so admire Michael and Annie, everything that they do for the literary community, and it feels like a little bit of a Lily Press Nixes mashup. So I'm gonna read a title poem from a collection that's coming out from Lily later this year. For now though, I want to read a few poems from Dear Teilhard. This is just a whole set of epistolary poems to a long dead Jesuit priest, paleontologist, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and I very much admire his work to the extent that I bought like a whole case of books from an abbey in New York State that was closing its doors, and they're all inscribed and there's notes. It's like one of the best purchases I've ever made in my life. And so I just dive into his work, and I feel like I'm constantly in conversation with him. But you know, he was a stretcher bearer in World War I. He was the priest. He was a paleontologist, a geologist. He helped excavate the Peking Man in China. Just an extraordinary life. And they call him kind of the patron saint of the internet, because he just envisioned the biosphere as one layer, but then there would be a connected consciousness as a new layer on Earth. And so he's just, I'm always thinking about his work. So I'm so happy these came together for the chapter here. So they're all titled Dear Teilhard. Dear Teilhard, there's a landslide about to break from California hills, but it's happening at the same time as a gender reveal wildfire gone wrong. So really, the trees are just twigs, just toothpicks in a fisherman's mouth. And by God, the mud will take the fire full on. And what they do in the privacy of their own landscape is their own business. And all this is just because I can't seem to say anything to the internet of people that doesn't feel like sludge, like an ice shelf vexed at breaking into speech. I am more like those ghost ships rocking in slowly to the shores of Japan. Careful not to wake the living with my opined dead. These aren't the kinds of things I can say to anyone, even if the Geminids were listening, even if they were posting gifs of themselves glimmering like new constellations. I'd still fall off a ladder staring up. We were supposed to take turns tearing ourselves like old t-shirts burning up in the atmosphere. Dear Teilhard, I thought I found the makings of a brain in stone. The many columns within, delicacy of antiquity that we might walk these marble corridors and know ourselves. Man of Auvergne, child of volcanoes, you only wanted to build the earth another fire. Now the earth itself is your disciple, and we are being hunted in our own sanctuaries. And by what? We cannot say. We have no grasp of that language. This one mentions Shokushin Butsu, which is an old practice in Japan, certain sects of Buddhism, where they would literally mummify themselves alive. So the term stands for Buddha in this very body. And I guess over the span of like 900 years, only 17 monks were able to do this. But you may have seen pictures where they're still in temples. The mummified body is there. Dear Teilhard, did you know there were monks who died alive 1,000 days at a time? No one could tell they were whittling away their lives, starting with grain, then fruit, then pine needles, then only tea from the bark of the rushi, like arsenic. They died alive so they might inhabit a room in heaven with their bodies still seated there, breathing. They waited inside a box underground and rang a bell each day, and when the bell stopped, the body was interred. If no insect, not even a grub, took to the flesh, they were moved inside temples, faces withered, fingers like the roots of cornstalks late season. It was the body they took themselves to drink strange waters. It was the bodies beneath ground where the earth filled their ears. I cannot ask how it felt to leave this way, to turn cells back like hands on a clock. Some of us drink ourselves to death, but that is bloating. The Shokun Sambutsu slipped the grates thin as paper, and their organs never let on, and their eyes, relieved of eyes, are what we seek. And then I'll just read the title from the Lily collection coming out. This is called The Observable Universe. We've all heard the question, why is the sky blue, but why is the sky dark at night is something else entirely. It becomes a story beneath the science, like infrared of Botticelli's Man of Sorrows revealing a sketch of Madonna and Child. What did he decide? Was a prayer rearranged into another prayer? We are left with what is observable, what we are meant to see. The universe itself is illuminated just right. What we see is light having traveled this far, and that's it. So much light still on its way. We'll never see it all, no human being, but maybe a tarsier with big soft eyes, or some distant relative gripping a tree, the night sky getting brighter. I'd hate it. Leave me inside the sensuous dark, or at least be bold enough to bring me a brighter lover to obscure the sky. Andromeda, or maybe Saturn and its rings taking a closer seat, the scale model of desire collapsing. 12 degrees tonight, and the ladybug clings to the kitchen light. The stars are clear as hell in this crisp air. When I ask what is observable, what I mean is what is still making its way to me. I've been told we create the kinds of relationships we want. Of course that's true, but it doesn't consider the distance required to travel. It matters sometimes to be far away. I am standing, watching the ladybug, wondering which prayer was closer to Botticelli, the one he hid from us. That seems right.
Next up is Jennifer Martelli. Her most recent book, The Queen of Queens, if you haven't read it yet, is amazing. And her book before that, My Tarantella, both by Odeguera Press, right? Am I pronouncing that right? She has a new book out, or a new chapbook coming out, which I don't see it listed on here. Oh, what is the name of it?
Oh, do you have the, that's my old bio.
Oh,
All
I
things
thought
I
that-
want to change
yeah.
their shapes.
Anyway, it is on there, sorry. She's the co-poetry editor of Mame Review and talk about accents. It's Jennifer.
for Nixes mate and for creating this space. And for Fly Cotton Chapbook series. This really was perfect. I was fooling around with these poems about Geraldine Ferraro, who was the nominee for vice president in 1984. She was the first woman nominated from a major party for that seat. And I was writing about the 80s, so a lot of drugs, and just like what that meant. And Michael, kind of came up with this idea of these historically themed chapbooks. So I was thrilled. It really it became the seed for the Queen of Queens. Thank you, Gloria, for this place, and Christine, just happy birthday, and your poems were wonderful. So I'm going to read just a few poems from this. Some of the poems changed a little bit, when it was put into a full length, but I'm going to read them as they were in this book. They're not major changes. Why I began writing about Vice Presidential candidate Geraldine Ferraro. Behind Commonwealth Avenue, next to the old Dome Temple, they turned into an observatory. The theater premiered Flashdance. After that, no one wore a sweatshirt without the neck hole torn to the shoulder knots, like Jennifer Beals, who unhooked her bra, pulled it from the sleeve of that big shirt without ever breaking eye contact. Of course, she was a welder during the daytime. I took the one freshman in my dorm who looked like a steel mill owner up to my single room. What I mean is, when my joints pop, when I'm like a maniac on the floor, ghosts come. I don't come to anything in quiet. Maybe it was there on the cold linoleum, maybe against the cinder block bricks, maybe it was there in the towers with this stupid boy on top of me, that I was hopeful I could conjure anybody I wanted. Someone smarter than I must know how many times I've orbited over 3 decades. Everything then is happening now. Back in the 80s, a rich man raped his first wife, and now I have to look at his face every day. Last night, I streamed Jennifer Beals on all my devices. How I love her every move. So, in 1983, 1984, Jennifer was like the most popular name in the world, basically. So that was another love I had for her. So, yeah, the 80s. Oracular. When I refer to the year of Ferraro, I'm talking about 1984. In the year of Ferraro, I loved my drugs, my runic lewds, loved to dance under those mirror balls, thought I was beautiful, thought I was heard. I carried a skinny mirror back then, wet my gums, shaped my brows. I saw the sky, saw an 8-ball moon. I saw the cure. The First Lady loved astrology, loved Chanel. She loved her little body all wrapped in red. A real picker-upper, she said. The cut glass mirror beads on her De La Renta sheath refracted light, all crystal white. She read the stars. She loved her husband's moons, his metal pig, his licorice beans. On a mirror, I wrote my name in powder, deep belly beneath a nightclub floor. I heard disco punk dance over me beneath the mirror ball. Could you hear me? Whole nights and into the next spent dancing. We loved our drugs, we loved our lewds, we tossed back the luminous rooms. You are heard, they said. They said, you are beautiful. So, the Challenger in 1986, there's a theory that they didn't die up there, that they were alive, I don't know in what condition. It's not proven, but it's a theory. So, Vinny, you're in this poem. So, The Challenger, January 28, 1986. I came home to my mother and cried myself into strep, fevering over a boy who wouldn't answer me, wouldn't stay, or maybe I was sweating absolute vodka out through my skin. She was folding laundry. Later, she would fold washcloths over and over, and I married that boy. Neither of us could read stars or runes or bones or crystal balls or entrails. It was a clear blue day and so cold no cloud could form, no bird in the air. They'd flown south. I suppose they migrated or they died. I could see the sky from the basement window, see the blue coming through, reflecting off the wood paneling and the gold linoleum. We watched the clear, warm Florida sky on the big television in the cabinet with the stereo and its linty needle. The rocket carrying the teacher climbed, smoke billowing white clouds, the only clouds on the eastern seaboard it seemed, and then the intestines of a white god spread. I wondered, is that supposed to happen high up? I wondered if my boyfriend would call, if I could get more coke. So high, 48,000 feet above the Atlantic, the rocket curved at its apex and began its fall, returned home. 2 years into his second term, the president assured us all that the future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. I will meet it with joy. Maybe he didn't know, couldn't tell us they were alive in that ship, alive for the slow arcing high in the blue sky, alive for the long descent to the ocean, rushing up to meet them. Thank you.
Next up is our host, Gloria Monahan, who's put on, if you haven't been to these readings before, you have to keep coming back. They are astounding, they're amazing. There's a great open mic. Gloria is, I don't know, the loveliest person I know, one of the loveliest persons I know. She's a professor of humanities at Wentworth. Her first book, Flawed, came out from Finishing Line in 2011. She had her forthcoming book, Hydrangeas, come out from Kelsey Press. And she had this book, and then she has a new book, which I'm overjoyed to be designing, Cormorant in the Strand. I'm a designer, not a remember. Gloria Monahan.
So thank you everyone so much. Thanks to Nixes for publishing all these amazing writers. And I'm really digging the Cotton Press edition. Just the feel of them is so beautiful. Michael's such a good designer. If you guys are looking to have your book designed, I highly recommend him. So my book, Torero, I became fascinated. I love films, and I saw this film with Adrian Brody. Do you guys know who he is?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So he's got a great face. So he played Manolete, who is a bullfighter in the 30s, you know, under fascist regime, but their bullfighters are like bigger than any celebrity that you can think of. And so I started doing a lot of research on this one particular one, Manolete, and I was fascinated with him. So I wrote in the persona of the bull, of Manolete, of his bisexual lover Lupe, kind of everybody. Manolete. The tip of your sword glitters in the sun. Your white teeth catch the light. The gold buttons of your coat spin into your body, barely pressing against the sweaty side of the bull. Small swords stick out at the sides like an indication. Your dance with him a spectacle. You push your body into the black bull. The swords pin him and decorate his massive strength. Your arms bent behind you like a dancing woman. The lull. of the afternoon settles into the dust. Flies hover over the sweat of the bull and the sweat on your brow. Your bright red mulatta flies over his body like a flower of lust. Your hands are smeared with the blood of the bull. It's your second kill today. The stands scream with terror and glee. Dust flies and settles on your shoes. The black bull is dying. It's 4 o'clock. So if you follow the dance of the bull, or you read Death in the Afternoon, or you know, this is a sort of ancient, right, art form, I guess. There's a lot of ritual around it, and so I was really interested in like their clothing and the camaraderie of the bandoleros and their relationship to women and their managers. This is called The Bull with Red Ribbons. His body moves like a line through my head. So slow are his movements, like a dance of love in my slow heart. Why does he move without moving? His arms above me masquerading intent, the red mulatta like a flash of a woman's lips locking my love. I feel the heat of his body against me. He pierces sword after sword into my ribs. It occurs to me this slow humiliation, this slow death, mocks me into motion. He is in my path to control me. He is a man and I am a bull, and his small foot pivots in the dust. Still, his swords and ribbons assault my eyes with terrible knowledge. He dies with me, this man who I love and despise. He dies with me. What can one man do that I haven't sought, forfeited, drawn, and given away? The day collapses into dust where his black shoe hits the ground. His brow convulses on my temple in the heat, and his hand brushes my side in an attempt at compliance and forgiveness. And this is the last one. I did some research on Menelete. Out of all the bullfighters, who are all like remarkably handsome by some bizarre coincidence, you know, Menelete, the way he trained was to nail his feet into a board on the ground and have this massive thing come at him, and he would move. You know, he had to train his body to move like a dancer, and I was really interested in that. Torero. And this is from the viewpoint of Menelete. Torero. When I was with the bull, my knees shook every time. My father was also a torero. I come from a long line of bullfighters. Our farm was in Cordoba. I'm not sure of the dust and how it settles on the ground. I'm not sure of the sun in my eyes, but I know the bull, and he knows me. I find him and call him. The distance between our bodies is fragile, like the wing of a linnet in the shade of summer. His sad eyes mirror the night when I lie above you, my hands over your soft body. I can feel his breath on my hand. His terrible horns tear my body. Even my face. I am a torero. I push myself into you, and during the day, you have the audacity to look at me with the same look I once gave you before I had you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Up next is my co-editor, co-founder, long time friend, Annie Paluto. In 87 actually, we got together. I was working as a letter carrier in Alston, and worst job I ever had. And it was like being in the military, but without the benefits of being in the military. So she met me after I got off work, and we went to this little dilapidated, desiccated building on Brighton Ave and talked to the landlady about renting a space on the second floor of this building. And she asked us what we're going to do. I said, we're going to open a bookstore. And she said, not gonna be porn, is it? And we said, no, of course not. But it was, you know, there was tattooing porn, and there was all sorts of alternative underground stuff. And we used to have, the hallway was long and narrow. We used to have readings and film shows, and we had bands play up there, and it was quite a time. So Annie's been in my creative side for forever.
35 years.
Forever. Or one of those soul things, right? Her most recent book, The Deepest Part of Dark, came out Unlikely Books last year, and she has a forthcoming book from Lily, Mary Wears Red, Annie Bluto.
Thanks. And Gloria, thank you for having us and for offering to do a Nixes Night. So many of these great books these series came out in 2020. You know, where were we? We weren't even using Zoom yet, right?
Still not, that's why we're here.
It's you, not me. I had written these poems that were found poems from the BBC interviews of people who had survived Chernobyl. And it was 20 years later, and what they said. So then I took them and I cut them apart. I like doing that. I like the New York Times, I like the BBC. It's fun. There's always a poem to be had out of a terrible subject, but you can make something out of it. So I'll read a couple of these. And they're different voices. I mean, they're real people. So this woman's name was Hannah Semyenko, and she was 78 years old at the time of this interview. And she was a resident of Chernobyl's zone village Ilyintsy, and she was evacuated to Yakutsk, 160 kilometers away, but she came back to her village. So this is her voice. Oh God, how they tricked us. They said they were taking us away for 3 days, and they took us to the end of the earth. To the authorities, we handed over our lives, cows, calves, pigs. We left everything behind. We took nothing with us but our souls. I spent the winter in Yahotin, came back here in the spring. There was nothing in Yahotin but steppe. Here, we have rivers and forests. So many of our young died here. I wouldn't go back. I would rather die. My brother lived here. In the first years after the accident, his daughter married, had a child, a boy, healthy as an oak. They lived here. What kind of radiation do you call that? Officials, they come, they check us, check our food, our clothes. There is nowhere as clean as here. They deceived us, drove people to the ends of the earth out of sight. Where is the radiation? In Yahotin, the levels were higher. They took us, 36 people in the village. We have electricity, thank God. I get water nearby. We grow potatoes, cabbages, and tomatoes. The mobile shops visit us twice a week. People who live here are old like me or older. There is a couple who are 90 or more. Tomorrow, they may no longer be here. And this one, there are two voices, Yenya and Anya Kostychenko. And Yenya was 39 and her daughter Anya is 19, and they were Chernobyl zone evacuees to Kyiv. I was 5 months pregnant when the accident occurred. My husband and I were spending the weekend at my mother's house in Kopachi, a village just south of the power station. We woke up Saturday morning, decided to go to Chernobyl. It is the nearest town to buy maternity clothes. At the bus stop, we saw many fire engines and troop carriers on the main road. We waited and waited, but no bus came. A A policeman told us there would be no buses. There had been an accident. There had been small accidents before, so we did not worry. We worked in the garden all day Sunday. I had to go and work in Pripyat again. There were no buses. We set off on foot. I began to feel very ill. My husband helped me home, then walked to Pripyat himself. He got back. The town had been evacuated. I was out of bed. Outside, a policeman finally told me the truth. There was high radiation and pregnant women should get out at all costs. I did not even know what radiation was. We drove to Ivanki. 2 days later, I was in the hospital. Doctors threw away my clothes and decontaminated me. In a cold shower, there were many pregnant women. There the doctors said we would all have abortions or induced births. They did some abortions quickly, then changed their mind, and we would give birth. After all, we went to Shop and then to Mykolaiv near the Black Sea. In each new town, I threw away my clothes. They were contaminated by my own radioactive body. Anya was born 2 months early. She was big, a 5.5-pound baby, with unformed nails and colored yellow, incubated. I was not allowed to see her for 8 days. Later in Kiev, specialists hospitalized her on site. You could not then say it was on account of Chernobyl. It could be anything except Chernobyl. Much later, a hematology professor told me I had been unlucky. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Anya is my houseplant. She's very rare. Blood disease and almost no immunity. In 2004, she caught meningitis and was in a coma for 3 days. It was told it was all over, but she rose like Christ from the dead. In the 1990s, a law was passed promising benefits to Chernobyl invalids, but nothing to children invalids. Together with other parents, we formed Flowers in the Wormwood. We successfully lobbied for the law to be changed. There exists the tendency to play down the problem of Chernobyl, if possible, to forget it. Once the 20th anniversary has passed, I think the state will begin to withdraw its support. And the last one is the epilogue, and it's Mikhail Gorbachev. So remember, Ukraine is part of the Soviet Union. So this is in Gorbachev's voice. This was his interview that made into a poem. I confess that we were afraid of panic. The Cold War seems as incongruous vestige of the past, demonstrated disaster unique. No country can be prepared for every eventuality. We must deploy the maximum effort to prevent disasters. Social, ecological, economic consequences too heavy in every sense of the word. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God. Responsibility enormous. Politicians, scientists, engineers, and designers, their mistakes cost the earth the life and health of millions. The victims continue to suffer. Moral duty to help them. Moral duty to help them while continuing to limit ecological consequences of this disaster. You waited 3 weeks. Silence. Soviet motto, don't seek advice from abroad. But who would know just how to handle the heat, put out the fire, and put out the light? No one could have caused more damage to Russia than the Russians themselves. Now the day of remembrance draws near. I see, I hear, I feel you. first part of the story. Then the Private Plunge bookstore survived for a while, and then Alston had like this rebirth, right, which threw a lot of us out of there. And we met in the, I don't know, 2013, 14, and talked about maybe we could start a magazine. And what would it look like? And what would the name be? And Michael picked the name because it's the, you know, the island where they hung the pirates. So, you know, you can, if you're flying over, you know, when you're going to AWP, you'll see it, you know, on the way back. And so many things have blossomed, the magazine, then the books, and many books, and we pull back how many books. So it's an ongoing process, but it's great to have a partner to work with. So without much ado, Michael McGinnis.
Thank you, Annie. So, like she said, Nixes May came from, there's an island, it's a navigational hazard. I think a booze cruise ran aground on there a few years back. There's like a weird beacon. You can see it if you're taking the ferry out to George's Island or Spectacle Island. One of our authors, she goes sailing once in a while, and she keeps on inviting me to go out and check it out. But the Fly Cotton series that everybody's been reading from comes from the fact that there was a pirate named William Fly who was hung and gibbeted on the island, and Cotton Mather wrote a book about pirates, so the Fly Cotton. But I'm going to read a couple little bits about it. This is from Cotton Mather's book, The Vial Poured Out Upon the Sea, from 1726. This is Cotton Mather. It is a most hideous article in the heap of guilt lying on you that a horrible murder is charged upon you. There is a cry of blood going up to heaven against you. And he's talking about William Fly. It's William Fly. I shan't own myself of any murder. Our captain and his mate used us barbarously. We poor men can't have justice done us. There is nothing said to our commanders. Let them never so much abuse us and use us like dogs, but the poor sailors. And then the Boston Newsletter of July 7th, 14th, 1726 had this little bit in it. On Tuesday, the 12th instant, about 3 p.m., were executed for piracy, murder, etc. 3 of the condemned persons mentioned in our last viz, William Fly, captain, Samuel Cole, quartermaster, and Henry Greenville. Fly behaved himself very unbecoming, even to the last. To the hangman said he, "You do not know your trade." Their bodies were carried in a boat to a small island called Nixes, about 2 leagues from the town, where the above said Fly was hung up in irons as a spectacle for the warning of others, especially seafaring men. The other 2 were buried there. That takes a lot of balls to tell a hangman that he doesn't know how to tie a knot, especially when he's about to tie you. So my contribution to this series is about John Eliot. And John Eliot, I don't know if you know, was a preacher to the Indians. He was Puritan in the 1600s. And during King Philip's War, he was horrified by what the colony leaders were doing to the Indians, especially his praying Indians. They rounded them all up and they put them on a sloop on the Charles River near where I live now, and then sent them out to Deer Island. And Deer Island at the time was a spit of land with nothing on it, just a windswept, and where many of the praying Indians died of cold and hunger, and and then they built a prison there, and now that's where we have our sewage. But this is the 4-part, but I'm going to read the first part. And this is the voice of what I think the voice of John Eliot. And the other little aside is John Eliot's cemetery in Roxbury, where he's buried. One of my French Acadian ancestors is buried there as well. He was a prisoner of war during the French and Indian War, when the British rounded up all the Acadians in Nova Scotia and sent them throughout everywhere. And one of my ancestors died there. And I went to look for his grave, but I couldn't find it, and all I found were gores and Cheney's, and I was so disillusioned. I have no right to speak, to call ye from this wilderness, from this half-formed civilization, from this city divided on 3 hills, an isthmus, a sea of drumlins and clam beds, a naked spit of land where, despite my petitions, the Indians were left under God's care, without their Bibles, that we had printed in their tongue, not realizing, perhaps not caring, that their language was oral. And yet Samuel Green, Marmaduke Johnson, and I, with the assistance of James, our Indian apprentice printer, furthered our endeavor to bring forth the Word of God, for he is the author of Scripture, such that the voice of God, the majesty, glory, and holiness of his truth would shine forth upon this forest and wash away the darkness there with the purest spiritual milk, would feed the spirit of the Indian with Bibles the color of black flame, the exquisite poverty of the inks, the texture of hemp paper, translating air, translating water, translating stone, translating the word with an alphabet of pain. And then I'm going to end with something. I don't write that much because I'm always working on other people's stuff, I guess, or because I'm lazy or whatever. But I will be reading more stuff next month at Miriam's. But
You gotta move to Plymouth, it's
yes, and it's handicap accessible. It's on the street, so there's no long stairs to climb up. During the summer, I was working on Beacon Street, remodeling some brownstone thing, and there was a laborer on there, and he was from Seabrook, New Hampshire, so the whole radiation thing, I don't know, must have leaked into his brain. So he would ask me these stupid questions during break, and so I started writing them down. The laborer said to me, he said, "When you were my age, ever think you'd meet someone like me?" By the time I was your age, I had been to Hawaii, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the same islands as Melville. By the time I was your age, I spent time in Philippine jail, been lowered to the rolling deck of my ship from a Seahawk, swam with sharks in the Indian Ocean, and stood weeping at Ground Zero in Nagasaki. In Darwin, I helped a Holocaust survivor after she fell down on my ship and gashed her forehead. By the time I was your age, I had been thrown off the back of a friend's motorcycle on the 405, thumbed from San Diego to Newfoundland, and published a punk rock zine. By the time I was your age, I had consorted with prostitutes, drug addicts, and thieves, and had been a prostitute, drug addict, and thief. By the time I was your age, I had seen sheet lightning skitter across the Subic Bay sky as if one of my migraines had metastasized. By the time I was your age, I had seen attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. But maybe, I thought I might meet a person like you. But that was probably when I was tripping my ass off out at the end of the Ocean Beach Pier in San Diego on a foggy night. Wait, the laborer said, attack ships on fire? Have you watched Blade Runner yet? Thank you.
Okay, so our next meeting is the second Sunday in February. It's on the waterfront at Books and Sundry, which is an independent bookstore in Plymouth. I handed out bookmarks, so you can get in touch with me at my email address. Michael and Lauren are reading, and we have a wonderful open mic. And it's a great place to come and spend the day. It starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so.
Thank you. And Linda, you want to talk about your work at the Minnehaha Arts Center?
Oh, yeah, well, next, we're the second Thursday of every month next month we have the legendary Marge Piercy as the teacher. And then we go, who do we have in March? I don't know, but in April we have Tom Bailey, Danielle Legros Georges, the former Boston Poet Laureate, and Matt Henry, Matt here. And we're pretty much booked for the rest of this year, but we'll start again in the fall. And if you're interested in, we always have an open mic, so check us out. You can go online to Menino Art Center. It's in Hyde Park in Boston. And